In case you're new, everyone at my school, Jules.
Something that is literally sweeping the nation. Everywhere I go, it is a whole thing.
Yo, what is going on, guys?
Today's video is gonna be a Juul sesh. We got the mango pod,
The cool cucumber,
Fruit medley.
I've got this creme pod because I thought it would be festive.
It tastes great.
Well, if you want a head rush, definitely the Juul.
That's really strong.
My God, bro, give me the biggest neck buzz.
The Juul challenge. You gotta hit this thing as many times as you can.
We're doing the Juul Hotbox Insane Nick Buzz Challenge, you dig?
I got some accessories.
Juul wraps. Type in charging case for Juul.
Rolo bag.
Soaring drop.
Ghost stick.
This one is watermelon. It is literally so good.
Good afternoon. I'm Robin Koval, CEO of Truth Initiative, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to a special Truth Initiative Warner Series webcast on quitting in the age of vaping. I'd like to thank our online audience representing communities across the U.S. who share our interest in making tobacco and its deadly consequences a thing of the past. When Truth Initiative began 20 years ago, the youth smoking rate was 23%. Today, through our collective efforts, that rate is now 4.6%, according to the Monitoring the Future survey, a decline of 80% from when we started, and truly a remarkable public health victory. However, at the same time, we are now at great risk of history repeating itself and swapping one epidemic for another. As the Surgeon General has stated, youth e-cigarette use is literally an epidemic. Ironically, and kind of sadly, as we mark our 20th anniversary, over 20% of high schoolers are vaping, most of whom were not smokers in the first place. And that's scary because young people who vape are 4 times more likely to go on and smoke deadly cigarettes. Nicotine addiction puts kids' brains at risk, including for other addictions. And the younger you are when you become addicted to nicotine, the harder it is to stop. The challenges of e-cigarettes are diverse. Unlike cigarettes, which have been denormalized in our culture, e-cigarettes, especially among youth, are culturally relevant. They're easy to access, they're easy to conceal, they come in a myriad of appealing flavors. Juul, which has over 70% of the market, is so popular with teens that it's actually become a verb, juuling. And while the risks of smoking are well known, young people don't have the facts when it comes to vaping, especially Juul. In a study we conducted last year, we found that 63% of young Juul users did not know the product always contains nicotine. In other research, we found that 15 to 17-year-olds are 16 times more likely to be past 30-day Juul users than 25 to 34-year-olds. And these young users were not just experimenting. Over 50% were using Juul more than 3 times a month, and 1/4 were using it 10 or more times per month. At Truth Initiative, we're doing everything we can to stem the youth vaping epidemic. Our Truth Youth Young Adult Prevention campaign, called Safer Doesn't Equal Safe, makes it clear that while e-cigarettes may be less harmful than a traditional cigarette, they are by no means safe and are a pathway to addiction. We also know that many young people who started vaping without knowing the facts are now saying, hey, I didn't sign up for this. They are addicted, they're angry, and they want to quit, but they don't know how. At Truth Initiative, in addition to our prevention efforts, we have deep expertise in helping people quit their nicotine addiction. Our innovative digital quit smoking programs, Become an X, and our enterprise level X program have helped over 800,000 people on their quitting journey. Through that experience, we also know that while the science of nicotine addiction is the same for traditional and e-cigarettes, the user experience is not. Quitting e-cigarettes, especially for young people, requires its own solution. Young people don't consider themselves smokers, and they don't want to join a traditional quit smoking program. The experience of e-cigarettes is different from combustible tobacco. The behaviors, when, how, where you use are different. The cues are different. There's no tobacco smell, no stains on your fingers or your teeth. There's a lack of social stigma. And so Truth Initiative has used its experience with young people and our expertise in helping people quit to fill this void for young people who want to quit vaping and who are looking for something that is tailored to them. And that's what we're here to talk about today. This is Quitting. It's a first-of-its-kind digital quit vaping program designed for youth and young adults. So let's get into the discussion. Our moderator today is Maggie Fox. Maggie is a journalist and writer with a special interest in health, medicine, and science. Maggie has served as Global Health and Science Editor for Reuters, Managing Editor for Healthcare and Technology at National Journal, and most recently, Senior Writer for NBC News. She's written about infectious disease, cancer, heart disease, mental illness, and of course, tobacco. It's my pleasure to turn the program over to Maggie and our terrific panel. Thank you and enjoy the discussion.
You had some startling statistics there about the e-cigarette epidemic. Whoever knew that the Truth Initiative would have to be fighting this whole new battle in 2019? Now I'm going to introduce our panelists who are going to do most of the talking here today. Each of them is going to tell us what they know about the e-cigarette epidemic, efforts to stop e-cigarette use, and how to help people who have trouble quitting vaping, especially young people. Next to me here is Luka Kinard. He's a high school student from High Point, North Carolina. Luka got addicted himself to vaping, to juuling, I think, right? And spent about 30 days in an inpatient treatment center. He's 16 years old, and he's sharing his story publicly so that he can help other people understand the actual dangers of vaping. He speaks at schools, at events, and of course he's been featured on television, including NBC News, CNN, and in the Wall Street Journal. Next to Luka is Megan Jacobs. She's the integrated public product design lead at the innovations team at the Truth Initiative. She helps design the software for the apps for helping people to quit smoking and vaping. She analyzes how well these apps work and also, very importantly, helps write the grants to get the funding. Megan also teaches mHealth and product development at the Milken Institute School of Public Health at the George Washington University. Next to Megan is Dr. Amanda Graham. She leads the Innovation Center within the Truth Initiative, where they design and build digital products to help people of all ages quit tobacco. Under her leadership, the innovations team has built a suite of technology solutions, including This Is Quitting, the Quit Vaping program that we're going to be focused on today. Dr. Graham's research focuses on how well technology-based programs work and understanding how to get them into the hands of the people who need them. Programs from her team have helped nearly 1 million tobacco users cut back or quit. Dr. Graham's also adjunct professor of oncology at the Georgetown University Medical Center. And joining us remotely is Dr. Susanne Tanski. She's associate professor of pediatrics at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth. She's been a pediatrician for 21 years and practices in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Dr. Tanski's interests include tobacco prevention and cessation, adolescent risk behaviors for tobacco and alcohol use, the media influences on children and adolescents, and ways to communicate about childhood obesity. So I think we'll start with opening statements. I think Luka goes first. Luka?
Hi, my name is Luka Kinard and I'm 16 years old. I'm going to my junior year of high school. And just like many teens within our country and within the world, I became addicted to juuling. I started off as I was a freshman and I was 14 years old. It was very hard for me to quit. It actually took me going into a 39-day treatment center in California, and that was very ground shaking for me. You know, I also had a grand mal seizure in September related to vaping. So that's just a little bit of my story.
Thanks. And should I remind the audience, if you come up with questions of your own that you'd like to ask, if you're watching online, feel free to type in your questions so that we can ask them at the end of the program. We're going to have this is a moderated discussion, but we'll get to as many questions as we can. Next, Megan.
Hi, thank you so much, Maggie. I have a few slides we'll be sharing today, just to give everyone some context about the work that we've been doing here at Truth Initiative. So in fall of 2018, we started seeing more and more conversations happening online and on social media, swirling about e-cigarettes, including many from young people who had questions and were asking about how to quit. They were asking for advice. They were asking if other people had gone through that experience before. And particularly on Reddit and Twitter, they were posting about how difficult it was for them to try to quit themselves. There's actually a subreddit on the popular social media site Reddit specifically dedicated to quitting juuling that has almost 900 members alone. So our team at Truth Initiative started conducting additional research, talking to young people and even older adult e-cigarette users about what it was like to quit. And we wanted to learn what those differences were between quitting traditional cigarettes and quitting e-cigarettes so that we could design a program that was really targeted to that experience of quitting vaping. We conducted one-on-one interviews, we explored the peer-reviewed literature, and also talked with our clinical partners at the Mayo Clinic about what their experience was like seeing nicotine addiction, particularly in youth and young adults. So the resulting program, as Robin mentioned, is called This Is Quitting. It's a text message program that's designed to help vapers specifically. It's very easy to enroll. You just opt in by texting QUIT to the dedicated phone number, 706-222-QUIT. And once you're signed up, we ask you how old you are so that we can funnel you into an age-appropriate version of the program. So if you're a young person like Luka, you get age-appropriate recommendations about using nicotine replacement therapy or understanding the context that you live in. So we know, for example, that teenagers like Luka are in school every day and they live at home with their families. They don't go to work and they don't generally have their own cars. And so the messages are really structured to reflect that experience of a high school existence. Users receive age-appropriate messaging for 1 week before their quit date if they choose to set one, and 30 days after their quit date if they choose not to set one. For young people who don't have a quit date set, they receive 2 weeks of messages designed to build confidence and get them ready to set their quit date and take that next step into their quitting journey. We also provide on-demand support for cravings, relapse, and stress. And we integrate in messages that have been written by other users. So about half of all the messages that users get have actually been submitted by other people who have gone through the quitting process and wanted to share their experience to help another quitter out. Sort of similar to what you're doing today, helping pay it forward and helping other young people quit. So I mentioned that we've tailored the program in terms of age and context, but all of the messages present clinically sound information about quitting and cutting down. So if you're not quite ready to go full stop and make that quit attempt wholeheartedly, but you want to cut down to quit, we have information about that as well. Age-appropriate guidance around nicotine replacement therapy. We provide social support because we know that many young people feel that they're going through this experience alone. And we also provide actionable tips and strategies that people of all ages can use to start their quitting journey. There are a lot of reasons why we went with a text messaging approach. First and foremost is that text messaging is a proven treatment modality. So we know from the tobacco cessation literature that text messaging has been used in a number of different clinical trials, but also just out in the real world to help people as they're quitting. It's easy to opt in. It's totally anonymous. All you have to do is text in. We don't collect any information from our users other than their phone number, of course, when they text in, and that age bucket that they opt into. And we can provide support for people who aren't ready to quit yet. So even if they're just curious or they're thinking about quitting, but they haven't quite made the commitment to set a quit date, we can support them with text messages as well. Furthermore, we can support quitters across the entire age and socioeconomic spectrum. So even if you don't have a smartphone or you don't have internet access, We know that 100% of young people, and Luka, I'm sure you can attest to this, everyone you know sends and receives text messages, no matter what kind of phone you're on. And so text messaging makes it easy for us to reach all young people, no matter where they are or what sort of socioeconomic situation that they're in.
Dr. Graham.
Great, thank you. So even though we're not collecting a bunch of information from users, we do have access to an enormous wealth of information. And so what I wanted to go through is what the data tell us in terms of the engagement and utilization of this program. So we launched the program on January 18th of this year with a segment on the Today Show. For those of you who are not familiar, it's a morning news and talk show. And we were thrilled to see about 2,000 young people enroll within a 24-hour period. We have real-time monitoring set up, and so watching these numbers tick through and reach 2,000 was really thrilling. Then on January 30th, 12 days later, Mashable ran a story on their Snapchat channel. Mashable is a tech-focused platform, and for those of you who are not familiar with Snapchat, it is enormously popular among young people. It's a social media channel that's really anchored around image sharing, and we've included the images from that Snapchat story that ran on January 30th about our program. The interesting thing about Snapchat is that the images are temporary. They last for something less than 24 hours. That's a setting that the user can designate. But it's enormously popular and really a primary channel of reaching and engaging young people. And what we saw is that it really reset our expectations. Within 24 hours of the launch of this story, we had seen more than 22,000 young people enroll. These are 13 to 17-year-olds that enrolled in the teen program, and 18 to 24-year-olds who enrolled in a young adult version of the program, the buckets that Megan referred to. Since that time, we've had a number of media stories that have run over the past 5 months. And what you can see, the numbers that we pulled earlier this week, is that we've seen about 38,000 young people enrolled to date. We're typically seeing about 100 to 150 people enrolling on any given day. I should note these are media stories that are all earned media. We haven't done any paid placements to date. And so what this really suggests is that we may have really scratched the tip of the iceberg in terms of reaching and engaging young people with a program and demonstrating really that there's clear demand out there. We also have the ability to look at the ways in which users are engaging with the program. And here we took a cohort of about 27,000 people who enrolled in the first 5 weeks of the program. And we looked at their patterns of engagement and outcome over the first 3 months that they were enrolled in the program. And I'll note that this paper has actually been published in the journal Nicotine and Tobacco Research. It came out last Friday and is publicly accessible for anybody who's interested. The reference is down at the bottom of the screen here. What we saw were really exciting patterns of engagement. 73% of young people set a quit date. The most common quit date was actually the day that they enrolled, which really signals that these aren't just young people exploring a program, but that they are eager and ready to quit vaping. As Megan mentioned, the program has a number of interactive keywords that can be used to get more out of the program. And here we see that about 45% of teens and 38% of young adults are using those keywords to really draw as much support out of the program as they can. We included a number of evaluation questions throughout the program, one of which asked what they thought of the length of the program. This was a 30-day program, and so we asked if the length should be longer, if it should be shorter, if they felt that it was just right. And again, here we're seeing young people asking for more support, 75% saying that the program should be longer. We also included in the program a number of questions that get at behavior change. At 2 weeks, we ask whether they've made changes in using e-cigarettes. And what you can see is that 60% of both teens and young adults at that 2-week follow-up are telling us that they've either reduced their e-cigarette use or they've quit entirely. At 3 months, we ask a follow-up question that again gets at behavior change. And here what we're seeing in terms of reports for having not vaped in the past 7 days, we see a 25% abstinence rate. And really what's exciting is a 16% abstinence rate for people who are telling us, young people in particular, telling us they haven't vaped for the past 30 days. We know that patterns of e-cigarette use fluctuate. They can be intensive, they can wax and wane, but to have this degree of abstinence, I'm sure in your experience, Luka, with a 38-day program, that's a significant milestone. So as Megan mentioned, it's very easy to enroll. You simply text QUIT to 706-222-QUIT. It's easy to do, it's anonymous, kids can do it sitting in a doctor's office without necessarily needing to disclose to a parent, to an adult, to a teacher that they're vaping. It's a very discreet way to be able to provide support. I also want to mention that we created a version of the program for parents. What we've been hearing is very clearly from parents this notion, you know, I thought I cigarette-proofed my kid, and now he or she is vaping. And so the program for parents is really designed to provide a lot of support and empathy around that experience and some very practical tips and advice and strategies to help create an environment that can be conducive to quitting and also the kind of support that young people might need going through this program. That program is available on our Become an X platform that Robin mentioned at becomeanx.org. And I'll turn things over to Sue. I've sort of teed you up with the clinician experience.
Thanks. I'm actually going to spend a few minutes on the clinical perspective, backing up to youth e-cigarette addiction in general for context. And I can't say my slides, so hopefully you're looking at a slide with a horse. So we all know that nicotine is a highly addictive drug, and really no adolescent sets out to become addicted to nicotine. One of the issues that we have with e-cigarettes is that they seem innocuous, and there's so much marketing and social media and peers influencing their attitudes towards e-cigarettes, they become interested or behaviorally willing to try them. And to go with the analogy depicted here, marketing and peers are leading the horse to water. And with the myriad of flavors, as Robin was mentioning, many, many young people are willing to give these cigarettes a try. And as we see in the trends that have been discussed already, many continue to use. And it really is likely that it is the nicotine in these e-cigarettes that's driving this ongoing use. Switching to the next slide, the nicotine in these newer pod-based devices, whether it's a Juul or a Swarin or a Fix or a Lush or a Stig, this has really changed the chemistry of e-juice solutions. They use a nicotine salt-based solution that has a different pH or a different level of acidity that's less uncomfortable to use and to vape and it's a completely different experience than a traditional combusted tobacco cigarette. And this even goes beyond the flavors, but only looking at how the nicotine itself is delivered. Juul patented their formula, which uses benzoic acid, which you see in the middle of this slide. And on their website, they've got their own research that shows the nicotine delivery from these devices is very similar to that of a combusted tobacco cigarette. And they also report that the nicotine delivered is, from a single pod, is about the equivalent of a whole pack of cigarettes. Unlike cigarettes, where a single cigarette is a unit of measure, pod users don't have these. They just take hits off the pod without that cue that they finished a cigarette. So some users just keep on taking hits, and they get significantly higher doses of nicotine while vaping without those noxious effects from the smoke and that throat hit that kids were reporting from other e-cigarettes and from cigarettes themselves. And given this rapid increase in current vaping among young people and the number who are endorsing, just like Luka, how hard it is to quit vaping, we're really concerned about nicotine addiction developing from vaping alone. So switching to the next slide, why do adolescents get addicted more easily to substances, including nicotine? It's all about development. Adolescence is a developmental stage that, from a scientific standpoint, that has nothing to do with the number of birthdays you have. You don't magically become an adult from a developmental perspective when you turn 18. The brain undergoes rapid development and rapid changes throughout all of development, and most crudely develops from the back to the front. So the cerebellum, which is in the back of your head, controls your coordination. Your amygdala, which is right in the middle, we call it your reptilian brain. That's your emotion and fear center. The nucleus accumbens, which is kind of behind your eyeballs, controls our motivation, our aversion and reward pathways. And finally, the prefrontal cortex is our regulation, judgment, planning, and self-control. The reward pathways are really important for survival. They satisfy hunger, thirst, exercise, sex, all important things. And this brain development pattern is why our toddlers are so dangerous. They have motor control and no fear. And that fear comes up again in adolescence when the reward centers are fully functional. They've figured out what feels good, but they don't yet have the judgment to put the brakes on those impulses. Interrupting or altering those reward pathways by introducing psychoactive substances like nicotine during adolescence creates long-term problems. By directly or indirectly influencing the molecules that hit that pleasure center and that reward center, drugs such as nicotine trigger these neurochemical events that are central to our feelings of reward and disappointment and pleasure and pain. So, in short, adolescents are developmentally primed for drug use and for experimentation, and then developmentally susceptible to addiction. So going to the next slide, looking at our previous experience with cigarette dependence, historically, the average time to get to pack-a-day smoking during adolescence was 2 years. After just puffing once or twice, that's kind of time zero, the average time to even inhale a full puff was 2 months. Time to a whole cigarette was 3 months, and to weekly smoking was 19 months. Teens reported craving long before even becoming weekly smokers, kind of at the 5-month point. And then withdrawal was reported at the 12-month point while they were smoking only about monthly, and then increasing use because of tolerance at around 14 months. While we don't have these patterns identified for vaping, we can all agree that it really seems anecdotally to be quite compressed. The trajectory seems to be really fast. Some kids go from their first hit to vaping weekly in one fell swoop, one single step. And this has really caused kind of urgency on the part of pediatricians and other healthcare providers because we've got the nicotine dependence on this novel device without clear directions as to where to go next. So next slide. We don't have any studies to date looking at cessation from vaping, and thus at the moment we have no conclusive scientific evidence as to what the best practice is for adolescent e-cigarette cessation. And truthfully, our body of evidence, even for smoking regular combustible tobacco cigarettes, wasn't great. It was a little limited. So we've got work to do in this sphere and within this population for all tobacco products still. Fortunately, we're down around 4% for other cigarette use, but we really are quite high on e-cigarette use. So until we have more evidence, clinicians are really using our best practices of what we had for combustible tobacco. But as Amanda said, we really are seeking something different. Teens in general don't self-identify that they have a problem. Luka was smart and he figured out that this was a problem. But a lot of times it's the parents coming to us and saying that their kids are having an issue. So at the very first, we need to identify the problem and talk to young people that this is about their use and about their dependence and addiction symptoms. And then giving them something that they would like to use. Teens really like self-help. They like to do it on their own. And so programs like This Is Quitting fill a very important role, and we really need to put some more testing around it to see how many kids we can help with this mechanism, and then what are the things that we can do to make it better so we can help even more kids and make nicotine addiction from vaping a thing of the past.
Great. Oh, Dr. Tanski, thank you. You've summed up everything very quickly. In fact, I think we can all go home now. But there's some startling numbers that all of you have presented here. Let's take it back just a little bit of a step, though. Dr. Graham, Dr. Tanski, can we talk about the epidemic itself? As Robin pointed out, as the Surgeon General has said, it's an epidemic. How do we know that? And is it really an epidemic? Why don't you start, Dr. Graham?
I think certainly the surveillance data make that clear. There are very formal definitions of what constitutes an epidemic related to the proportion of a behavior within a population. It's sort of a term that comes out of the epidemiologic literature in terms of defining a particular phenomenon. I think, as Robin mentioned, one of the key aspects that has really become apparent is how very normalized this behavior has become. What we've heard in the conversations that we've had with kids who are vaping, with kids who are trying to quit vaping, with parents, is that this isn't a behavior that's happening among necessarily the rebellious kids, the kids who are struggling with grades, the kids who are not active in school activities. A lot of times this behavior is happening among kids who are doing well, who are very socially connected because it is so normative and popular. And so I think there's the surveillance data aspect of it, which is certainly alarming, and we're expecting numbers to come out this fall, which will be even more alarming. But I think the human side of it, which is really the focus that we've had in developing this program, is understanding an epidemic from the experience of the people who are going through it.
Can you add anything to that, Dr. Tanski?
Well, just kind of following up on the epidemic aspect of it, I think this is a very contagious problem. Kids are catching it from their friends. And we've got the popular kids who are using this. It has social currency. It is socially relevant. And so this really is being caught from peer to peer and spreading in that way. And again, looking at the numbers and looking at the rates that have been increasing year over year, a 75% jump in the number of kids who've used in the past month. This is really a significant problem and something we're seeing every single day. I saw patients this morning, and one of my patients was endorsing how often she's been vaping. And, oh no, I can quit. But can she? And it's really concerning. And when you just look at the market share, particularly for Juul, and you look at the graphs to show how it's just clobbered everything with regard to its uptake and market share, this is indeed an epidemic.
Well, we have first-hand testimony here, Luka. Can you tell us a little bit about when you started? Did you have any idea just how addictive vaping was going to be?
Absolutely not. You know, when I first started vaping, it was my freshman year of high school, and it was my first Friday night football game. And, you know, the first thing I wanted to do was fit in with everybody else in high school. So I guess the biggest thing with the addiction was the sense of gratification I got from that. And I had no idea how soon I would gravitate to that feeling. And, you know, being human, all we want to feel is being gratified or being validated. So I had no idea how that was going to affect me and how addictive it was going to be getting into it.
When did you realize you were addicted?
I didn't really realize I was addicted until probably about 3 or 4 months in, when I realized that I was selling my clothes to go buy pods. Instead of buying meals, I would go out and I'd buy pods, or I was at school and I would skip a class, or I'd skip a lunch period to go and get pods. I realized very soon after doing all that I was addicted.
And when did it stop being fun?
Around the same time I was starting to sell clothes and stop skipping meals, so about 3 to 4 months in.
Did somebody influence you? Did you see other people doing it?
Definitely. I don't want to put names up there, you know, of course, but there's definitely people that influence me. You know, you see it so much in culture. Also, you see it on social media, whether it be celebrities, even sometimes some sports people. You know, it's so widely broadcasted to our youth and our adolescents, so it was definitely influenced by that.
Dr. Tanski, you touched a little bit on the different devices and how they deliver nicotine differently. Can you talk a little bit more about that, especially the issue of nicotine salts and how the body kind of takes it up more quickly?
Sure. It's pretty complicated. There's multiple generations of devices. The first ones that came out, we called them cigalikes. They look a little bit like a cigarette. And those are the ones that they don't deliver a lot of nicotine. They were using the kind of free-base nicotine, so it's more alkalinic, it's not as acidic, a little more burny, a little more of a throat hit, and those are not particularly popular among young people. And then the next ones that came out were the ones that you could refill with the different solutions, and you could go to a vape shop, and you still can, and buy any flavor you can even imagine. And those mostly are not, they're called free-base nicotine, more alkalinic, and then it's progressed to these things they're called mods, where you can change the electricity to them to change the voltage, and that changes how much vapor comes through. And then the most recent one are the pod-based devices, where they're kind of a plug and play. You buy these pods, you plug them in. There are some devices where you can refill the pod devices as well, but again, that's a kind of yet another variation. So we've got this huge variation in the different devices, and everyone's experience can be different. With Juul, there's electric control so that every puff can't exceed a certain number of seconds. But with other devices, you can suck in vapor for 10 seconds. So you can really draw in a lot of vapor. So everyone experiences these in a different way. And because of how people use them differently, they get different nicotine content. There's different particulates that are drawn in. So everyone's experience is very, very different. What we do know from some of the literature that's been coming out is that the nicotine salt-based solution seems to be absorbed better. And again, it's that smoother experience. It's not as harsh to the back of the throat, so people can take in more. And there was a small study that was done at SUNY Stony Brook that looked at levels of a called cotinine. It's something that's a byproduct that once you take nicotine in, you can see it in your urine. And the pod delivers a higher level of cotinine, which reflects a higher level of nicotine that's brought in. So we're getting some early evidence that some of these pod-based devices really are delivering higher levels of nicotine than other e-cigarette devices, and they really are analogous or similar to combusted tobacco cigarettes.
And there's no question that this creates addiction. Megan first and then Sue, can you talk about how vaping addiction might be different from addiction to cigarettes? One thing I noted was that this program is amazingly successful, and one of the numbers you hear is that it takes 11 or 12 times to quit smoking cigarettes, whereas the quit vaping program was working quickly, but also the addiction process was compressed. Right. So can you talk a little bit about the differences between vape and cigarette addiction?
Sure, I can speak quite a bit to the young people that we've spoken with in trying to learn more about the experience of what it's like not just to be addicted but also to try quitting. Just that experience of using e-cigarettes is very, very different than combusted cigarettes. Nobody's smoking a cigarette during class. Nobody's probably even smoking a cigarette in the bathroom at school. But that is how kids are vaping a lot of the time, and so it's easier to just have it be part of your normal school day, part of your normal day-to-day activity, and that can make quitting even more difficult because even if you leave your device at home, so many other kids at school have them. Or if you sell your device to someone else, they might just sell it back to you, or someone else would sell it back to you. So just the prevalence of it alone, I think, makes quitting a lot harder for young people than for traditional combusted cigarettes.
Luka, what's the best way to get through to other young people, do you think, to help them understand the dangers? Teenagers are not generally open to the idea that this is dangerous, you shouldn't do it. What do you think is the best way to get through?
Well, unfortunately, being a teenager, we do not like hearing numbers. Although the numbers and the facts are the greatest things ever, that's great information. All information is good information. But the biggest thing is being on a personal level, having a connection, because the biggest thing we want as teens, really, is we want to feel connected. We want to feel like we matter. We want to feel validated. So, asking these questions of, how do you feel without this? How do you feel when you're using? Why did you start? Were you around people when you're doing it? How do you feel? There are different questions about different environmental factors about it. So the biggest thing is just giving them those more personalized questions to them.
I want to build on that, actually. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
That one of the things we hear resonates particularly well with our users of This Is Quitting is that so many of the messages come from other young people directly. They've been written by other people. All of our users have the opportunity to submit messages to add to the program. And it's something that really, for us, gives us a huge opportunity to learn about what young people are saying and what they would tell other people to help them quit, but also just that feeling of connectedness and that we hear from users constantly that they don't feel like they're alone. Even though they don't know those people individually, they don't know them in real life, that's okay. They don't need to know them in real life, but they see these messages coming through from other people who are going through this process, and they genuinely do feel less alone in their quitting process because of it.
I'll just add to that, and this is really a testament to Megan's work in crafting a program that resonated with young people. We've built in a number of open-ended questions throughout the program as a way of engaging young people in that conversation rather than simply pushing messages at them. One of the first open-ended questions asks them to share what their reason is for quitting. We've gotten over 7,500 replies. That's probably an outdated number by now. Back to that question, we're in the process of looking through those answers and coming up with, kind of a synthesis of what those are. What we're hearing from young people are responses that sound like they're being sent back to a peer, to a friend. I know I'm talking with a bot, but thanks for your support. And so I think that's one of the key aspects of this program that really resonates with this need for connectedness and feeling less alone in going through this process.
It sounds very similar to some of the online programs that help people with depression. And I guess that goes into the whole question of why young people need a different approach, because young people interact with technical devices in a different way. Is that right?
I would speak to really the tone and the content and the importance of seeing things that feel like a fit. So at Become an X, we've run the platform for 11 years now. And as Robin mentioned, we've had over 800,000 people come to the platform, tobacco users of all kinds. They tend to be slightly older. The typical demographic is somebody who's in maybe their early to mid 40s, starting to experience health consequences, starting to experience the impact of combusted cigarettes. And so for a young person to join an online community, to see images that maybe don't necessarily reflect their experience, their peer group, might be a turnoff, might feel like, you know what, this program might not be for me. On the flip side of that, we know that there are a number of reports in the published literature of programs that have been designed in an academic research setting that have tried to co-opt language used by young people, and they fall just as flat. And so I think there's really a critical element of finding the sweet spot of connecting with young people, really understanding their experience and reflecting that back in a very genuine, natural kind of way.
I think one of the main contributing factors that led to us developing a text message intervention was actually how many of the young people that I was interviewing as part of the formative research in developing this program only wanted to have those interviews with me by text message. And so I asked, when would be a good time for me to call? And they're like, actually, I'd prefer you not call at all. Can we just do this by text? And so that really started that thinking process of, maybe this needs to just be a text message intervention if that's how even the people that I'm interviewing are preferring to communicate. You can look at all the data in the world about how many text messages a day young people are sending, and that's all fine and good. But the reality is that when they're talking about quitting or talking about vaping, and this is how they feel most comfortable doing it, that's a signal that that's how we need to be intervening.
And I just want to clarify, this is a bot. You're not live one-on-one with somebody on the other end of this.
That's correct. It's an automated text message program. It sends scheduled text messages tailored to your quit date or to your enrollment date. But we know from technology trends in general that people are comfortable talking to that. I mean, I talk to Siri all the time. Many people talk to Alexa in their home, or they talk to personal assistant bots on other websites or through Facebook Messenger. And so that idea of interacting with technology in a one-on-one way as though it's a friend or as though it's another person just isn't really that foreign anymore. And I think that this program taps into that trend a bit in a way that people feel genuinely pretty comfortable with.
Luka, you did it the old-fashioned way. You went into rehab. Does this program sound appealing to you, though?
It does. For me personally, I'm so bad at responding to text messages. I probably wouldn't have been the best at it or wouldn't have applied myself. But gosh, if I had that before I went to rehab, I feel like if I had applied myself, it really would have definitely helped me out.
Now, you guys talked about how effective it was just to have a hit on the Today Show, to have something go out on Snapchat. But Luka, what's a good way to get the word out about this program to kids your age?
I definitely say the Snapchat opportunity is a great one. I know people look at that all the time. Mashable is actually very familiar to me, so that's a great way. I think every way and any way is an awesome way to advertise. Maybe getting through more ways through Instagram, how they have ads on Instagram or ads through YouTube. There's so many different ways that we can do it, but I think any way possible for advertisement is amazing.
And then the next obvious step is, Sue, what about pediatricians? Is this something that pediatricians should be bringing up in an office visit? And if so, how do you introduce the subject of vaping?
So I actually think this is something that's really critical for all clinicians to ask their young people about, and to make sure we really understand how kids are using the product. Because there are some kids who will engage with something, and again, as I mentioned earlier, folks don't necessarily want to come in for a visit or go to a cessation group or do a quit line. So this really fills a void, and I think this is a great opportunity. And as pediatricians, we can use our platform to try to get the word out about this is quitting. The other place I think is really important is actually create some peer networks. So within a group of kids who are using, if one young person found success with the this is quitting, that they become ambassadors and they let their peers know, this is something I tried, it was cool, I liked it, why don't you give it a try? So we really need to get where all the kids are. And, if I'm lucky, my kids will come see me once a year. So I'm not necessarily the best person. Letting this get out to the schools is also really important so that we can do some direct-to-kid advertising in the bathroom stalls. The CDC has their initiative where they've got some cool posters that say, would you believe people come in here to go to the bathroom too, and not just vape? So using all the tools we have to get to where our young people are living and spending their time, and especially with peers.
And leading on from that, you've had some interest, I think, from school administrators and public health officials. So how do you get them, A, to know about the program and then make use of it?
We have had a lot of interest from youth-serving organizations. As I mentioned, the outreach that we've done has been largely earned media, interviews, conversations, webinars, outreach efforts that have not been paid placements. And we've received a lot of organic interest from those. These run the gamut from obviously schools, school administrators, school systems, health systems. We're in a number of conversations with state departments of health that are interested in rolling out the program on a state level. And so, I think opportunities like this to really get the word out and reiterate that this is a freely available program that will be offered by Truth Initiative, and also that we can run in conjunction through youth-serving organizations. And Megan can speak a little bit to how we've been contracting with some of those organizations.
Sure. So we know that state departments of health, for example, or school districts, or even at the individual school level, they want to have a resource to give to young people, especially the ones who come in looking for something, or to young people who are presenting in emergency departments with symptoms of nicotine addiction or concern about that. But they also want to have resources at the ready for parents who go looking on the state website and say, what can I offer to my child? And so we offer the opportunity for states or school districts or any partnering organization to essentially get a custom keyword to opt into the program. And that allows us then to be able to report back to those institutions how good of a job they're doing at promoting the resource. So many organizations, they're all concerned about return on their investment, right? They want to know what the uptake is and what kind of outcomes they're seeing in their specific target population. And so we offer that reporting back to them. And we know that one of the other big asks from partnering organizations is, how do we promote this program? Or we don't have the resources to develop promotional materials. And so that's part of what our partner organizations get from us, is actually a toolkit, essentially, of how to promote the program, with some promotional materials designed for social media and designed for in-person handout, whether that's flyers or small wallet-sized cards that you could give to someone discreetly, whether that's at school or at a doctor's office, or even through sort of atypical channels, right? Maybe there's sports leagues in that area that they're planning on giving out a welcome packet to all the kids. And so just being able to tuck it discreetly in there, and so kids have it if they want to take advantage of it. And so we provide a toolkit of starter promotional resources for our partners to promote the program as well.
I just want to add just an acknowledgement that CBS Health Foundation has very generously invested in this program to help us get the word out over the next 2 years. And so efforts like that have really been critical to us being able to think creatively around promotional materials and around creative strategies for dissemination.
It's still got to be hard because this is two steps here, isn't it? With cigarette smoking, everybody knows and agrees it's bad for you. There's a lot of disagreement about vaping, and people don't yet have the message that it's bad for you. So does that affect efforts to disseminate information about the program itself?
Yeah, there's a real challenge. There's sort of the tension between messaging to an adult audience of established smokers and the potential benefits of an e-cigarette as a cessation device, and then messaging to young people with a very clear message that any form of nicotine is dangerous, regardless of how you get it. So what we're seeing is that there is a lot of confusion. There is a lack of knowledge about certainly the harms of nicotine among young people, but then this notion that e-cigarettes are safer than cigarettes because they've heard that message as it's been directed to an adult audience.
I will say that this program is designed to be a resource for young people who are interested in quitting. And even if they don't fit the traditional profile of an addict, or even if clinically speaking we wouldn't define them that way, if a young person is feeling like an e-cigarette is not for them anymore and it's not serving them in their life anymore, then we want to be there and have a resource for them. And so they don't need to sort of be clinically defined as someone who's addicted to be able to use this program and to be able to benefit from it.
So is this a seamless program that can work equally well for cigarette smokers and vapors, or is there something specifically different about it? And is there something specifically different about reaching out to youth as opposed to adults?
So this program of quit vaping text messages is really designed specifically for quitting vaping. We've heard throughout all of our formative research that, as Robin said, young people do not identify as smokers if they are vaping or juuling. And to put even a finer point on it, some people who refer to themselves as juulers do not even think of themselves as vapors. And so really speaking specifically to that experience of quitting vaping, these text messages are designed very specifically for quitting vaping. And the ways that we talk to young people are very specific to their context and their experience, and the types of things that they're likely to see in their own day-to-day lives is very different for young people than it would be for adults. And we do serve adult vapors who want to quit as part of our adult cessation intervention, Become an X. So it's not to say that we have nothing for them, but This Is Quitting is designed specifically for a youth and young adult audience.
And Dr. Tanski, in your experience, is that useful to have something that's specifically aimed at young people as opposed to an entire population?
Absolutely. Adolescents are definitely different than young adults and older adults, and from everything from language to receptivity to all the things we've already been talking about, they need their own program. They need something special. We cannot take something off the shelf and assume it's going to work. And our experience with cessation for combustible tobacco has really shown us that what has worked for adults has really not worked very well for adolescents. And so we've really needed to kind of become creative and come up with some different things that have not shown a lot of benefit with combustible tobacco. So this is really an exciting opportunity to have This Is Quitting available.
Amanda and Megan, it sounds like you consider the program to be a success. There's some startling numbers about uptake. How far do you think you have to go? Do you have like a set goal for the number of vapors you'd like to help?
We've pondered what would it be like to have a mashable story a month, to have 2 mashable stories a month, to have that level of enrollment and reach, and certainly partnerships with clinicians like Sue through schools to really broaden the outreach, represent really exciting opportunities for us. You know, it's hard to quantify the total population of 3.6 million kids who are vaping. What portion might be interested in a treatment program? I think that's some of the learning that we have ahead of us over this next year. These are observational data. This was a cohort study that looked at treatment-seeking young people. And so not to dive too far into the scientific sort of research methods, our next step is really to be able to answer more definitively the questions around effectiveness. We know that this is a program that's appealing. We know that it's a delivery modality that kids are interested in using, that they're willing to engage with. And so the next sort of step in that line of research is to noodle through some tough decisions around how to conduct research with adolescents, which is traditionally challenging, to answer questions specifically around effectiveness. But there is an enormous gap in the literature, and we're excited to be on the path towards filling that gap.
I'll also say that on the horizon for us is more full integration to leverage the reach and power of the Truth campaign that the Truth brand has to reach and engage young people in totally unparalleled ways, certainly from a public health perspective, but just from a general brand perspective, the power of the Truth brand to touch young people and to bring them into a program. We're really excited for more full integration with This Is Quitting and the Truth campaign coming out this fall. And I think that that's also an opportunity to bring young people in and then continue to stay with them beyond just the length of this treatment program, but to continue to sort of inoculate them with the Truth brand and hopefully carry through that that anti-tobacco sentiment to carry through with them beyond the time that they've considered themselves a vapor or a jeweler, but to keep them with us as part of this fight against tobacco.
Is there any data, there are clear data on how many smokers want to quit? Are there data on how many vapors want to quit? What percentage?
I don't have a good answer to that. Sue, do you?
We don't have data yet.
Yeah, what I will say is that most of the national surveys are focused on uptake, patterns of use somewhat, but really coming at the problem more from a prevention lens and documenting this really steep uptake curve. We know very little about the experience of people who missed the prevention message and who are now squarely in line for cessation messaging and delivery of an intervention.
So it sounds like it's the standard, more research is needed. What's your dream research schedule? What would you have people looking at? What questions need to be answered, and how do you set that up?
Well, I'll give a nod to the folks at the FDA. I know we have a number of them who registered for this event, and I anticipate that they're dialed in. There have been 2 meetings that the FDA has held, convenings. Sue and I were able to meet at one of them back in January to really think about what is a cessation treatment agenda, research around cessation treatment. What is it that we know? All of the things that we've been talking about today, the extent to which the combusted cessation experience is applicable, the adult cessation is applicable to young people. The challenge, as we all know, is that federal funding cycles are slow. There are a few funding opportunity announcements that are available now that are focused on electronic nicotine delivery systems, ENDS, and they have a prevention focus. And so I think part of the first step is really acknowledging that we do need cessation research. Federal agencies need to step into that space to come up with funding opportunities. But given that slow funding cycle, I think organizations like Truth Initiative, like clinicians, other organizations that are youth serving, that have the ability to step into this space to start to answer those questions have really an obligation and an imperative to do so.
What would you like to see, Sue? Or do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Amanda's basically hit everything. We really needed to do this research 2 years ago so that we'd actually have something ready to go. I don't think any of us really anticipated how bad this was going to be and how much difficulty kids were going to have, or young people are going to have, from trying to stop their vaping. It was kind of an unintended consequence, if you will. And perhaps the industry is excited because now they've got more people using their products. But from a public health standpoint, this is pretty horrible. We've got a whole population of young people who are now addicted to nicotine from these new devices. And many of them are not interested in quitting yet. And so getting the information out that this is not benign, and maybe you don't want to be addicted to something. Maybe you don't want to, so this other product to have control over your own reward system. So we've got a long way to go, and agree with Amanda. FDA is really working on this, and they're convening these groups, and hopefully they'll be able to throw some funding towards this so we can get some answers and some real evidence as to how to help our young people quit.
Is there any advice for parents as well? Should parents be a part of this, or should they butt out? How important is the role of the parent?
Speaking from a kid or a teen's perspective, you know, to a degree, parents should be there. It's just the way they go about it. You know, if a parent's sitting there nagging them, it's just like homework. I'm not going to do my homework if you sit here and you're in my ear about it. But you know, if you're very accepting and you're non-judgmental of the whole situation, it feels more like you're there as a support or a shoulder to lean on. Then of course, by all means, be there. But it's just the way we go about it, for sure.
Yeah, and I think the message for parents, for teachers, for school administrators, for any adult, is to recognize that this is addiction. Yeah. And punishment and scolding and nagging and yelling, all of what Luka was saying, we know are not evidence-based methods to address addiction. And so starting to recognize what a nicotine addiction looks like in young people. There's some work that is being done on that front. I think we have some questions about whether the measurement devices that we have are really applicable, but starting to identify changes in young people that just don't quite add up. And recognizing that the punitive angle is not the way to go, that this is a problem that needs support and empathy and compassion and ultimately help and treatment.
We've asked ourselves a lot of questions. I'll bet you there's people in the audience who have a lot smarter questions than I have. I just want to remind people in the audience to please type in any questions you have. We welcome your questions. And we're also happy to take questions from the audience here if people have them. But
Maggie, can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
So actually, I'm going to use your words. So when we had a meeting about this just recently, I believe you were the one who said we are not going to yell, punish, or suspend our way out of this. And I think it's really important that people recognize that these aren't good kids or bad kids. We have a bad problem. This is nicotine addiction. It's dependence on a chemical substance. And so we kind of need to our parents to particularly understand it's not that their kids are good or bad. It's just their kids got hooked on a substance. And that is, there's no value judgment there. We need to focus on the problem, which is the nicotine.
I was startled by some of the figures that you guys gave on how many people had signed up for this program and how quickly they were helped to meet their goals of stopping. Is there any chance of people sliding back? Is this are they permanently able to kick the habit, or do you have any idea of how much at risk they are of sliding back into addictive behavior?
I mean, I think with any addictive substance, there's always a prospect of relapse. No matter how long you've been quit, there's always a prospect of relapse. And I don't think we have enough data yet to know long term. I mean, we just launched this program in January. We're reporting 3-month outcomes right now. I will say that This Is Quitting is a flexible program. It allows users to set, change, and reset their quit date as many times as they need to go through the program. And so we hope that if young people do have relapse, that they take advantage of the keyword slip to get instant support for getting back on that quitting path, and that if they choose to do so, that they reset their quit date to go through that process in a way that feels comfortable for them. But I mean, absolutely, with any addictive substance, that's always an unfortunate reality.
Luka, how do you feel? Do you feel an urge to vape from time to time, or are you done?
I'm done. It's been so much time. Actually, coming up in about 2 days, it'll be 8 months exactly. So
congratulations. Very good.
Odd flex, but there's the opportunity to do it is obviously still there, but the want or the need or really the craving, it's not there anymore.
So we've got a question. Does This Is Quitting advocate for teen users to talk to their medical provider about trying nicotine replacement therapy or medications?
So many young people do not know, and many even adults don't know, that nicotine replacement therapy is available with a prescription if you're under 18. And so we do say in This Is Quitting that nicotine replacement products can make quitting more comfortable, and that you should talk to your medical provider, and that you may also need to talk to your parent about seeking it out. For our young adult library, for people ages 18 to 24, we encourage use of nicotine replacement as part of your quitting, because we know that it can make quitting more comfortable and more likely that you'll be successful.
And talking about medications also, I was on a medication this summer, about a year ago now. I was on Wellbutrin. Wellbutrin's used to make the need to want to quit less there, and the impulse there, not as much. So I was using that, and honestly, it didn't help anything. It just felt like I was taking a pill in the morning. But that's just me from my personal experience.
Sure. And that's not quite the same thing as nicotine replacement, but that's really good insight that perhaps some of these support medications might be helpful as well.
It's not a silver bullet for sure, no. But I mean, certainly appreciate you speaking about your experience, because it does help other young people just to know that other people are trying medication.
Are there questions from the floor? They're coming. Oh, okay. Luka, how have your friends reacted to your quitting? Are they supportive or judgmental?
All my friends have been very supportive of what I've been doing. But being teenagers, man, we're evil. So, there's definitely a lot of judgment. There's definitely a lot of judgment, whether it be online or be actually in person at school. So I tend not to look at it, but occasionally if I see it, it doesn't really affect me, but there's definitely been a lot of support.
And I guess for teenagers today, it's different because when most of us were growing up, the friends you talked to were the friends you saw at school. With social media, you've got a huge audience of people you barely know or don't know at all commenting.
Yeah.
That's got to be tough.
At the beginning, it definitely was a little bit, not exactly the idea that it would hurt my feelings or anything like that. It was just more frustrating to the idea that, people, it's a missed opportunity for them. It's sad to see people who we've given opportunities for them to go down the right path, but unfortunately, as we are teens and as we are human, sometimes we just don't take those opportunities. So if anything, I feel bad, or I just want them to have the opportunity. There's no judgment that goes in with it on my part, but it is interesting to see what people say.
And boy, they can say things. Do you plan on making the program, I guess this is for Megan or Dr. Graham, do you plan on making the program longer than 30 days since you received the feedback from the teens who are using it?
Yes.
That's direct. There you go.
Are you going to use kind of empirical data to figure out how long it should go?
So a big part of it is a little bit of that ebb and flow of making it longer, seeing how people respond to it, add in more content, see how people respond to it. And so it's not necessarily that we're going to go out of the gate and make it a 6-month program, from 30 days. We'll incrementally make things longer. We certainly have tons of messages that other users have submitted to add to the program, so that that content is definitely there. People want to help other people out. And so yeah, we'll continue to add to the program and see where that sweet spot is. I don't know that we know. We'll make our best guess, and if people still say they want the program to be longer, then we'll keep making it longer. But as of right now, we don't really have that magic number of how many days it should be.
And I think that's the value of doing this work in a team environment that includes a data science team, rich analytics. We have all the data at our disposal to be able to do that kind of tinkering and optimizing on an ongoing basis. One of the interesting things that we're talking through is this next question of how to evaluate the effectiveness of the program. My inclination is certainly to be delivering a substantive, meaningful kind of treatment to young people who reach out for help. And traditionally, what we've seen in the literature is the use of a waitlist control group where people aren't offered treatment, or a no treatment control, or an assessment-only control where they just get questions periodically and no real actual intervention. Our work in optimizing this program on an ongoing basis gives us the ability to continue to deliver the best of what we have and to experiment with opportunities to make it better. And so I think there's really a nice sweet spot there with balancing our mission as a public health organization to deliver an impactful program with filling a very needed, urgent gap in the scientific literature. And I think we're really in a fortunate, unique position to do that.
It sounds like you've got lots of tricks in your pockets, too, for measuring these outcomes. Megan, you mentioned a little while back about how you used a different opt-in word depending on who was using it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it helps you kind of separate out the data that you're getting?
It's the same kind of thing as if you're voting on American Idol. If you want to vote for Roberto, you text Roberto into the shortcode. And if you want to vote for Aaron, you text in Aaron to the shortcode. Going forward, that's a very similar model where we give different partner organizations a Roberto or an Aaron, and then their users use that keyword to opt in, and that way they're all getting the same intervention program once they're in, but it gives them the opportunity for us to report back on those different promotional strategies. And for partners of ours who have customized the program in different ways to be more culturally relevant to the audiences that they work in, there are some opportunities there to deliver a slightly more tailored version of the program for their audience.
Do you have more freedom than some people do to kind of do real-time monitoring of the effectiveness and then tweak it as you go along?
Well, I don't know who the more opportunity than whom, but yes, given that it's a program that's completely run and developed entirely in-house. We have complete control over the data visibility and the opportunities to optimize it, which is a really special opportunity that we have by working here at Truth Initiative.
I guess I'm thinking in terms of, government intervention studies where you've got to say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to report the outcomes, and they can't change as they go along. But this sounds like you can kind of tweak the course of the boat as you go.
As FDA and the other partner agencies issue those kinds of funding opportunities, we'll certainly be interested in applying for that kind of protocol-driven research. As you mentioned, this is much more real-world A/B testing, optimization, where we have the flexibility to learn as we go and to build on those learnings and to publish, like the paper that came out last week, to publish and share what we're learning along the way.
We've got some more questions. How do you use the parent program? Do you text the same number? Is there a separate toolkit for parents?
So we encourage parents to register at becomeanx.org. To sign up for the program. You can get text messages designed specifically to help you as a parent. You can also access our community of supportive individuals. Some of them are parents themselves whose kids are going through this quitting process. Some of them are other people who have gone through the quitting process themselves that you can learn from their experience. And you can also learn a lot on becomeanx.org about what nicotine addiction is, how it impacts your brain, and what kinds of things you can expect to see throughout that process of quitting. So we really recommend that parents go there to register and take advantage of the text message program. But any parents who do happen to text in to the youth number, they'll be directed to the right version of the program. So we've got ways to make sure they get to the right place, but we encourage adults and parents to go to becomeanx.org.
And that's XEX.
Correct. Like become an ex-smoker or ex-vapor.
Yes. Excellent. There's a question for Luka. How often were you vaping daily? What about your friends? And then there's a second part, but we'll hold that.
For me specifically, at the worst, it was about four pods a day. So that's a pack a day, which is absurd to think about. That's a huge amount of nicotine going into me. For my friends, I personally do not know. I'm just going to speak for myself because I don't want to offend other people at home. But I definitely say that from just viewing from teenagers and people around me, that it was pretty on par to where I was. I was definitely more rapid. And I was definitely more avid with my usage of it.
Smoking's often very social. You see a ring of smokers. Is vaping like that?
It definitely is. You caught me to sip right there, but yes, it definitely is. It's just like, with adults, they're sipping wine at a bar or sitting down with their friends, enjoying a cigarette with some wine. It's the same idea. If sometimes I've heard a lot of people say, if I'm in an awkward situation, I can just kind of sit here and puff it to get out of that awkward situation or that awkwardness or that awkward silence. So absolutely, it is a social thing.
There's a question for researchers. What do we know about how often youth who are addicted are vaping daily? Is there hard data on that?
I would say this is another, I'll defer to Sue if she has different evidence. I would say this is another place where we don't know much. Patterns of use, level of addiction, the experience of quantifiable, measurable addiction among young people, we just don't have much data right now.
So another thing we need to study.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of studies that are starting out to try to capture how dependent vapors of different products are, but they're small and what we know so far is pretty early. So hopefully we'll get more information kind of year over year, every 6 months, because there are people who are looking at this to try to figure it out.
And just in regards to other brands of electronic cigarettes other than Juul, it wasn't just like I was using my own stuff. I was using other people at school, people's surrounding systems. So, with whether it be a Stig, a Soren, Mark 10, Blue, I was using those other systems to get my nicotine fix.
So is it a currency like cigarettes used to be? As a reporter back in the olden days, you knew you'd carry a carton of cigarettes with you to kind of bribe the people you wanted to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like a trade for a trade. It's just like, you're in a lunchroom. It's like, I'll give you that biscuit for mashed potatoes. Like, it's the same idea, It's, I remember oftentimes it was like, I'll give you a hit for a hit. Or it's just like, you've been hitting this too much. Like, you owe me food. Like, there are so many different ways that is being used, so it definitely is like a trade system.
And it's expensive too, so you would keep track of.
Oh yeah, I would. Oh yeah, that's my money. Yeah.
Here's a question for Sue. What are the current data regarding the effect of e-cigarette flavorings and chemicals on lung and brain development in youth?
So there is some very concerning research around lungs. It's not lung development, but around the danger of flavors to lung tissue. And a lot of this is done in animal models or in kind of tissues, so it's samples rather than in humans, but looking at what happens with the different flavors. And what we know so far is that some flavors are pretty bad, and in particular flavors that have a cinnamon flavor are quite dangerous to tissue. Some of the stuff is very alarming, and unfortunately all of these flavors, they're maybe safe to ingest. You can put them in your stomach, but none of them really have been tested for inhalation. And so we're really doing a lot of experiments on our people, on our bodies. And as we're finding out, some of these flavor constituents, some of the different flavorings that are in these different products are pretty nasty, and they really can cause some damage. With regard to brain development, I have not seen anything specific around flavors in brain development. That's an interesting thought, actually, and I've not seen anything on that. There is obviously a lot of work on nicotine and the brain, but nothing with flavor. So it's an interesting question.
Can you tell us a bit more about the cinnamon? What is cinnamon irritating to the lungs, or does it go beyond that?
It is. It is. It's quite irritating, and it's actually the cells themselves can die in response or cause specific harm in being exposed to the cinnamon flavors. And it's interesting. You can even do an experiment if you. Well, as a pediatrician, I saw a kid who had a challenge, and he ate a lot of Big Red, and he actually developed ulcers in his mouth, like sores in his mouth. And that's a flavoring in his mouth. He chewed a whole bunch of it and held it in his mouth. The same kind of thing can happen in your lungs. So if you inhale a lot of cinnamon flavors and it touches your lung tissue, it can cause direct tissue damage. And if you take the flavor as itself and you put it on plastic, it eats the plastic. I mean, it's pretty impressively gross. So more to come on that, but some of the flavors indeed are concerning, and we know from a scientific standpoint that at least the vape itself on these cultures in these lab studies is showing some damage to the cells themselves.
And I think diacetyl's another one that's been found, and
yes.
That's the popcorn lung chemical,
yes.
correct?
Yep. And we've not had cases. So this is the other challenging thing, is that for so many diseases, it takes decades to demonstrate harm in a human. And it's kind of this buildup of little bits of harm day to day before you say, oh, disease. And we don't want to hit disease. We want to prevent that before we get to that stage. And so we're really trying quickly to get some evidence to show where the harms are so that we can remove those harms as we can. And we haven't had human cases of people saying that we've had specific harm to lungs because of specific flavors or because of popcorn flavor. And without that, it's kind of hard to tell people, well, we think this is bad, because people don't believe us. We don't have the right credibility until we've got the evidence of harm. And so it creates a problem. We don't want there to be harm at all. And we don't want to have to wait to see it.
This one could go to any of you. I think you're all experts on this. How do you tackle the "I could quit, but I don't want to" question?
Something I used to say a lot.
Really?
Oh yeah. My mom can attest to that for sure. I definitely say that within addiction, nobody's going to stop anything they don't want to do. If I told you to stand up and go get me water, you're not going to do that. Like, who are you saying that to me? It's the idea of "I could quit, but I don't want to" it's sometimes absurd for the listener to hear. So it's unfortunately one of those things where you cannot make them quit until they have that desire. So you just unfortunately have to sit back and watch. But during that time you sit back and watch, you give them ideas, or you feed those ideas to them, or you give them more information on other things they could be doing other than using nicotine or substances, We just need to list their options, because that's the biggest thing for wanting to. Because if you get options, more times often than not, you're gonna get an option that you want more than the other one.
Anything from the researchers?
Yeah, I think this is really what's exciting to us about this rollout of the program behind the Truth brand in the fall, is really combining powerful, provocative, edgy, thought-provoking messaging that we know comes from the Truth campaign about not just the potential harms, but certainly the social currency of it, and is this really something that you want to be engaged in? Getting kids to think twice about what they're doing, about what they've sort of taken at face value as a thing I should do because other people are doing it, paired with now a resource. And so the combination of both of those two messages to really get kids thinking and then present an opportunity to do something about it when the time is right, when the seed is planted, and they make a decision, as Megan said, I might not be ready to go all the way to set a quit date today, but I'm going to poke around and see what this program's all about. And that for us is a win.
I'll also say that we're hearing more and more anecdotally, certainly nothing in a large population data set or anything, but a lot of schools only have one hammer, and that hammer is disciplinary action. So when they see students with an e-cigarette in school property or on campus, that's the only tool that they have, and that's not necessarily a tool that they want to use, and they're ending up with a lot of holes in their infrastructure. Student athletes who are losing their places on teams, or student leaders who are losing their leadership positions because of these suspensions, and that's not something that administrators want to be doing. And so if they can have other tools at their disposal to even talk about trying quitting, giving quitting a try instead of just going straight to disciplinary action, that may be another avenue to at least get some young people thinking about trying to quit, even if they're not fully ready to make that commitment yet.
What I'm hearing here is a lot of hope. There's programs that work. There's ways to reach people. There's positive outcomes from this. It was a little scary coming into the whole idea of there being a vaping epidemic, but the success of this program and the work that you're doing gives a lot of hope. I think we're going to have to wrap it up after one last question, a very quick answer from somebody. Luka, what's it been like with your friends, your peers? Have they quit vaping as well?
Some of my friends have. It's not that it was like a permanent thing or wasn't just because of me, it was because of their own. They did it for themselves, which I think is exactly what they need to do. Sometimes it's kind of awkward seeing people still die. Before I went to rehab and then after, like before they weren't doing it and then after I saw them doing it. So it's definitely had a lot of stress on myself, even having to sit back and watch. But since I know what it was like, I'm more understanding of it.
I'd like to thank everybody for their time, all of your insights, all of the explanations you've given. I think Robin Koval would like to wrap this up for us.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, panel. A great discussion. I hope everyone enjoyed this today. You gave us some optimism, right, Maggie? You said that's what you heard, and I think that's what I'd like to leave this on. Together, we will make progress in this tobacco control community with all of you to ensure that we do not have a new generation that suffers the burden and the risks of nicotine addiction. I think we're off to a great start with This Is Quitting, and I look forward to all your help in solving this problem with us. Thank you so much for being part of our webinar today, and more to come.